Demetria Clark here, Director of Heart of Herbs Herbal School, and this is the Certified Herbalist Certification Program. And today we're going to talk about the history of herbalism. So really, in reality, who were the first herbalists? Probably they were women. They took care of children, they foraged for food, and learned the edible landscape. Were there men? Yes, absolutely. But in early culture, men hunted and women gathered. So it only makes sense that women were some of the first herbalists. How did they distinguish what was safe and what was not? There's probably a few ways that this was done. One was watching what the animals ate, and two was sharing knowledge with each other. So it would be, did this work? Did this not work? Did someone have a reaction? Did someone die? And all of this knowledge would be kept with the women of the community, and they would share amongst themselves, and then it became part of spoken history. But I'm going to go over some historically herbally accurate dates. So, in 2900 BC, formal schools of herbalism existed in Egypt. This was one of the first that's been documented. Chinese herbalism is well known and respected worldwide. It has its origins in 2700 BC to modern times, and you can still become a traditional Chinese medicine person or herbalist. There are different colleges that focus on that throughout China, and there are some schools in the United States that cover this practice. It is often a practice that is also done in conjunction with acupuncture. In 2500 BC, the Sumerians were also advanced and well aware of plants that had a medicinal value, and they were some of the people in this time period who were recording this information. India has given us Ayurveda, and this is a form of healing that is still well used and taught all over India today, and it is still one of the offered medical options for individuals who live in India. You can find Ayurvedic practitioners in the United States also. Greece also made a massive contribution to herbalism throughout the ages, and some of the first schools, herbal and medicine schools, came from Greek civilization about 1250 BC to 450 AD. The Hippocratic Oath comes from this period. We have a copy of the Hippocratic Oath in your course manual. Modern herbalists have many great resources at their disposal, ancient and modern works from European, Asian, and American nations. These are all well documented and easier to access in the modern age of the computer. We have a massive pharmacopoeia the world over, and we need to allow ourselves to be open and in touch with all aspects of natural healing. Every single culture has their own form of herbalism. Many of them follow very similar lines and lineages. In almost every culture you'll find that mints are used for tummy aches, or red raspberry leaf is used for pregnancy. This is something that is through the world over. Some ancient herbs that are still in use today are flax, elder, ginseng, thyme, witch hazel, chia, nettles, sorrel, wild mint, pennyroyal, and rue. And this list, of course, can go on for ages and ages. Herbs will come in and out of vogue and in and out of fashion, and you'll notice that as you sit in the herbal world for a while. Some herbs that were really popular years ago aren't as popular or on the front pages of every herbal magazine like they were. That doesn't mean that the herb isn't as effective. It just means that another one has stepped into the spotlight. In the Middle Ages, Benedictine monks were a primary source of medical knowledge, and most of this knowledge came from copying Greco-Roman and Arabic works rather than creating substantially masses of new information and practices. At the same time, folk medicine in the home and village continued uninterrupted, supporting numerous wandering and settled herbalists. These individuals were considered wise men, wise women. They were travelers who came with information, and these people were probably some of the targets of the witch hysteria that went through the European world at this time period. One of the most famous women in the herbal tradition is Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century Benedictine nun who wrote the medical text called Causae et Curae. During the Middle Ages, the study of plants began to be based on critical observations. In the 16th and 17th century, an interest in botany revived in Europe and spread to America by the way of European conquest and colonization. Philosophers and academics started acting as herbalists and studying the plants in great depth. Herbalists began to explore the use of plants for both medicinal and agricultural uses. They collected, grew, dried, stored, and sketched plants, and many became experts in identification, and some of these drawings are still considered very accurate today. In 1334, a copy in Arabic describes the medicinal features of cumin and dill in Dioscorides' Materia Medica. This also shows full illustrations of the plants. Some of these ancient texts have been transcribed, and you can find them today if you do a little research online. A few places have scanned them and made them available. In the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries, that was the great age of herbals. The first herbal to be published in English was the anonymous Great Herbal in 1526. The two best-known herbals in English were the Herbal, or General History of Plants, by John Gerard, and the English Physician Enlarged by Nicholas Culpeper. Culpeper has a fabulous book that you may want to get your hands on that you can still find in many bookstores, Culpeper's Herbals, and it has really lovely illustrations. Culpeper blended traditional medicine with astrology, magic, and folklore, and was ridiculed by physicians of his day. But his book, like Gerard's and other herbals from this time period, enjoyed phenomenal popularity, and some are still in use today. The Bandianas manuscript was an illustrated Mexican herbal written by Nahuatl and Latin in the 16th century. The second millennium, however, also saw the beginning of a slow erosion of the preeminent position held by plants as sources of therapeutic drugs and as sources of their therapeutic effects. Later in this time period, the four-element medical system proved powerless to stop the Black Death, and therefore Paracelsus and others like him introduced the active use of chemical drugs. Some of these were extremely dangerous, like arsenic, copper sulfate, iron, mercury, and sulfur. These were used in a variety of different ways, along with other kinds of therapies that were found to not be as safe. And that was kind of the beginning of pharmacological medicine, utilizing other things other than plants. Traditional herbalism is regarded as alternative medicine in the United States, but it's also used extensively all over the world. Herbal medicine is probably more enmeshed in our culture than you realize. For example, in the United States, some 17 billion was spent by more than 158 million Americans in the year 2000 on herbal medicine and herbal products. A recent study indicated that more than 70% of the German population reported using natural medicines. The worldwide consumption of herbal medicines is enormous, so that in terms of population exposure alone, it is essential to identify how widespread the use is. So that is why organizations like the World Health Organization are starting to keep records and practice pharmacovigilance systems to make sure that herbal medicine is being used safely and that we can find a nice way to safely use herbal medicine in conjunction with modern pharmacological medicine. They are looking at trying to understand the consequences of combined use and monitor adverse reactions and effects throughout the world.